Hi, friends. So, we are getting into our next chapter book. We will be starting on Ada Twist and the Perilous Pants. This is by Andrea Beatty, illustrated by David Roberts, still. And with Ada Twist and the Perilous Pants, it says the Questionnaires book number 2. There are 4 books in this series. The first one is with Rosie Revere. The third one is with Iggy Peck. And then the fourth one, which will be coming out soon next month, is with Sofia Valdez, which we will get into those second 2 people a little bit more later. So, when Rosie Revere's Uncle Ned gets a little carried away wearing his famous helium pants, it's up to Ada and friends to chase him down. All right. And we'll just start with the first 2 chapters today. So, if you look at the picture, it's a picture of kind of a cycle because it's going in a circle. At the top of the cycle, it is a full-grown chicken. And beside him, there's this question mark. So from there, there's an arrow that goes to an egg. And then there's an arrow that goes to a cracked egg. So it looks like it's hatching. And then there goes an arrow to a half-broken egg with a chicken coming out of it. So then at the bottom, it says, what came first? Chicken or egg? Chapter 1. Ada Twist woke to the smell of breakfast. She jumped out of bed and followed her nose to the kitchen where her father was cooking eggs with onions. He was also boiling 2 dozen eggs for egg salad. There you are, he said. Hugs in a second. Eggs first. Everyone knows that chickens come first, said Ada. Her dad laughed. It was the same joke Ada made every time her dad cooked eggs for breakfast. They were being goofy, but the age-old question still made her wonder. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Someday, thought Ada, I'll do an experiment to find out. Hugs come first over here, said Ada's mom, who was sitting at the table by 2 coffee mugs. Ada hugged her mother. The smell of her mom's sweet perfume mingled with the bitter scent of steaming hot coffee. The mix was one of the best smells in the world to Ada. She smiled. My turn, said Mr. Twist, setting the bowl of eggs and onions on the table. Ada took a step toward him, but stopped suddenly. The strong, bitter aroma of coffee above her mom's mug filled her nostrils. But her dad's mug of coffee had no smell at all. Ada leaned closer and sniffed again. Nothing. So on the picture we have her cat who is lapping some milk up from his bowl on the floor. We see her mom sitting at the table looking down at Ada. Ada's looking up at mom, but she has a thinking face. She's curious because her dad's cup is close to her head or her face, and she's wondering why she can't smell that coffee as opposed to her mom's coffee. Ada pulled out her notebook and jotted a question. Why does mom's coffee have a Why does mom's coffee have a smell but not dad's? Ada's dad smiled and hugged her. Did you already find a mystery before breakfast? He asked. Ada grinned. Questions filled her mind as she looked at the coffee mugs. The day had just begun and she already had a mystery to solve. As a scientist, nothing made her happier. And then at the bottom of the page, it's 2 coffee mugs. One that looks like it has steaming coming out of it and the other one that does not. So then we see a picture before chapter 2 where it says whiff of coffee. And so we have a cup of coffee, which she has labeled with the word coffee on it. And then it has like the little steam squiggles coming up from the coffee mug that she drew. And she labeled that steam. So under she wrote hot equals smell with a question mark after it. Then she drew her dad's coffee. She has a coffee mug labeled with the word coffee. No steam. We don't have those same squiggles. And so then she said it's cold. And so then cold equals no smells with a question mark. So we're trying to figure out what is smell versus smell. What does that maybe hot coffee mug have to do with it versus that cold one? Chapter 2. Ada pulled the tape measure out of her pocket. She always kept one handy. She measured the distance from her nose to the top of her mother's coffee mug. She bent closer and closer to the mug, sniffing, measuring, and taking notes. She could smell the coffee from her mom's mug from 12 centimeters away. Notice that she used centimeters. That's a metric unit of measurement. She repeated the steps with her dad's coffee mug. But she could not smell anything from his mug until her nose was only 4 centimeters away. Even then, the scent was faint, and that means it was very light. "Your coffee is broken, Dad," said Ada. "It doesn't smell." "Keep investigating," said Mrs. Twist. "You'll figure it out." Ada knew that using all her senses was a great way to gather data. Look at this. Ada's using some of those same methods that we have talked about in the scientific process. I love it. Ada looked carefully at the mugs. Steam rose over her mom's mug like wispy smoke. Ada placed her right hand over the steam and her palm became damp. She placed her left hand over her dad's mug. Her left hand stayed dry. Finally, Ada touched her mom's mug. It was hot. Her dad's mug was icy cold and a little damp. "Zowie!" said Ada. Her dad laughed and picked up his mug and took a drink. "It's iced coffee," he said, "but the ice melted, so it looks like it's the hot stuff." "And speaking of hot," said Mrs. Twist, "can we eat while our eggs are still hot stuff?" While Ada ate, more questions swirled around in her mind. What makes hot coffee hot? What makes steam? Why does it go up? Why was Dad's mug damp on the outside? Why does hot coffee smell more than cold coffee? Do other things smell stronger when they are hot than when they are cold? Every question gave her 2 more questions, and each of those questions led her to 4, just as they had in the picture book. So then there's a small picture where it says steam over mom's coffee mug and then no steam over dad's coffee mug, which are all labeled the steam, no steam, mom's coffee, dad's coffee.
Thing.
I did not mean to press that. Sorry, friends. Just then, Ada's brother, Arthur, came into the kitchen carrying his tennis racket and his tennis shoes. As he passed Ada, a toe-curling stink whacked her right in the nose. "Zowie," thought Ada. An idea popped into her brain. She could do an experiment. "I wonder," she said, and she tapped her chin. A look of panic crossed Arthur's face. A similar look crossed her cat. Miss Johnson is not reading at her best. Let's try this again. A similar look crossed her cat, Bunsen Burner's face. Bunsen darted out of the room. Arthur pointed at Ada. "Ada's doing that tapping thing," said Arthur, who had seen that look on her face before. It usually led to something messy happening. Or worse. "Hey, Arthur," Ada said eagerly. "Do you want to help me do some science?" "No," said Arthur. "And don't use my stuff. Remember what Mom and Dad said." Arthur loved his sister, and he loved science experiments too. But he didn't love Ada's experiments when they used his stuff. He was still getting pudding out of his Lego blocks from the time Ada tested what made things sticky. After that, his parents made rules about how Ada could conduct her experiments. But sometimes she forgot. Rule number 1 was don't take author's things without his permission. Of course I remember, said Ada. I wrote it down, see? Ada flipped open her notebook and held it up for him. And on it, it says, don't take author's stuff. I always write down important things, so I won't forget, Ada said. Arthur frowned and plopped into a chair. As he ate his breakfast, he watched Ada warily. But Ada was too busy working to notice. She scribbled notes and grinned. She loved having a question to explore. It was a mystery, a riddle, a puzzle, a quest. This was the moment that Ada loved best. It was science time. Oh, that's just like the picture book. I love it. So we'll read chapter 3 tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you there. Bye, guys.